A lot of people dread this time of year as college football winds down. A lot of people look forward to it. I'm just going to tell you straight up, it is bittersweet that we are at this point in the college football season. I am Colin Bashnigal, your host here, Bash's CFB show, Bash's College Football Show. You can find me on TikTok with that tag, as you can see it right by my name over there. You can find me on Twitter at bash_CFB, or X, I guess is what we're calling it. And there's the TikTok again, just to reiterate. And there is Twitch. I go live there every single time. Apologize that I haven't had the stuff going on when it comes to the recap and stuff. I've been working a lot on our preview, but I've been sick all week, so my voice has not exactly been there this week. So that's why I didn't do the rivalry week recap, but there is plenty of content on my TikTok specifically from Saturday. If you want to go and check that out, that's what I would do. Let's get straight into these previews without further ado. This Liberty offense, 12-0. They haven't really been tested too much, but they have entered into the top 25. They're going to be taking on a red-hot New Mexico State team that ever since these two teams played, giving New Mexico State their lone loss of the regular season of conference play, rather, in the regular season. They have been really, really good. You have a couple weeks ago where they beat Auburn by 21 points in Jordan-Hare, better than what Alabama was able to do. And then you have a strong, gutty win at home against Jacksonville State, an 8-4 football team that's probably, if Jacksonville State was eligible for the conference championship game, Jacksonville State would have been battling New Mexico State to be in this game. Now, Liberty is favored by 11. They beat New Mexico State by 16, but I think New Mexico State's going to show up and play a whole lot better in this game. First off, Diego Pavia has been a very, very good quarterback, a steady hand here. They've also been able to run the ball pretty well with Star Thomas being the leader of that running back room. And Pavia can run around a little bit. I really like what New Mexico State brings to the table on both sides of the ball. They play really, really good defense. And on the other side, Liberty, an offense that has been up and down this year, but for the most part, up. Caden Salter at the Tennessee transfer has been really, really good in Jamie Chadwell's first year. And is there any denying that Jamie Chadwell is a brilliant coach after he takes over Hugh Freeze's roster and does tremendously better than what Hugh Freeze was doing the last couple of years? Overall, I think that this game is close because I think New Mexico State is going to be able to move the ball on offense. I think that they're also going to be able to play good complementary defense, but I'm going to take Liberty to win. But like I said, I think it's going to be close. I'm going Liberty to win this ball game 34-28. This is going to be a fun one, definitely one that is going to somewhat go into Friday night with the headliner, and that is tonight, by the way, Friday night. Headliner being number 5, Oregon, number 3, Washington. Wow, we get a great rematch here, and this game was incredible in the regular season. Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., outside shot of the Heisman for Michael Penix Jr., the Heisman favorite, Bo Nix. Even though I do think Jaden Daniels should win it, it doesn't matter what I think. Oregon's favored by 10 in this matchup, and I honestly think that's a little bit too many points. The weakness of this Oregon team is their secondary. Now, their defense has been playing lights out lately. They've been playing their best football as of late, and that is something to watch for. But they haven't gone up against an offense nearly with the capability of Washington. The issue is, and the reason why this is also a 10-point spread on a neutral field, this Washington offense hadn't been playing all that well. But you give me Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, who has been kind of not as good, a couple of drops in the last couple of weeks. And then if you can have a healthy Jalen McMillan, this Washington passing attack, I think, is going to get back to their roots in this ball game. But I do think Oregon's going to win. I think Washington's going to keep it close. So I'm going to take Oregon to win this one 42-35 with a late touchdown for Washington to get the late cover. They failed to recover the onside kick, and Oregon, I think, would punch their ticket into the college football playoffs. So we'll talk about playoff scenarios at the end of these previews. Oklahoma State and Texas. 15.5 is a lot of points, but the only reason why I'm not telling you guys for sure that Texas won't cover is because what Oklahoma State does plays right into Texas's strength. Nobody can run the ball on Texas, and Oklahoma State is great at running the ball. We just saw later on in the year, them go and play a team that was dreadful against the run, have a game plan that shut down Oklahoma State's offense to the tune of a blowout of 45-3 against UCF in Orlando. Albeit it's a little bit more of a trip, and albeit it was a trap spot, you're going to get a way better version of Oklahoma State in this game. But will it be enough to dethrone Texas? Well, this would be the most Texas thing to do, wouldn't it be, to end up losing this game and falling out of the Big 12 race that way, or falling out of the playoff race that way? I don't think it's going to happen. I'm going to take Texas to win. I'm going to guess that the score is about 31-20 or something like that, so barely the under hits. I like this Oklahoma State team, but when they're playing their best ball, and I think this defense can play pretty well, but overall, Texas is just a better football team. I think we're going to see that played out on Saturday. Speaking of Saturday at noon, we have another Saturday at noon matchup. It's the MAC Championship. Daquan Finn takes on Brett Gabbert in Miami of Ohio. Miami, Ohio has been a team that has just been gutsy. They've been able to play really, really good defense, and Toledo is a team that can definitely throw that ball around a little bit. Toledo has not been exactly playing their best ball as of late, but part of that is they clinched the conference championship game a couple weeks ago. So they didn't play great against their rival Bowling Green because Bowling Green gave them their best shot, and Toledo kind of limped through that game. But Toledo ended up coming back and winning that ball game, and they end up winning last week to lock up an undefeated regular season in the MAC. I think Toledo's the better team. I think the 8 points are an indication of that. And I think Toledo wins this game comfortably. I think they're going to be able to put up points, move the football. I'm going to take Toledo to win 38-14 at the demise of Miami of Ohio, whose 10-2 record is a little bit misleading. I don't think they're as good as their record shows, but I guess we'll see as time ticks until we get to kickoff of that game. UNLV and Boise State kicks off right before the 4 o'clock games in the Power 6, I guess is what we should call it for you American Athletic Conference fans. Boise State is -2.5, and this is odd to me because I do feel like the better team is UNLV. This offense has been absolutely electric, headlined by Mayava, who is a younger quarterback, wasn't supposed to be the starter, and he's come in and played very well in conference play. They're coming off a loss against San Jose State in which they were locked into the conference championship anyway. Did that factor into it? I'm not sure, but Boise State with Ashton Jeanty, they've been a really good rushing attack, playing really good defense with Andy Avalos. This is going to be a tall task, though. They got to be able to keep up with UNLV's offense or be able to shut them down, and I don't think they can shut them down. Vegas knows more than me, and that's why Boise State's favored, and that's why I'm worried about this, but I'm going to what my eyes have told me all year and what my heart has told me all year. UNLV is a heck of a football team. They're going to win this game. Up until a couple of weeks ago, their only loss of the season was against Michigan, in which they gave Michigan their best game through the first, I want to say, 8 games. So I'm going to go with UNLV to win this ball game in the Mountain West Championship. Alabama, number 8. Number 1, Georgia, the game of the day more than likely. Now, this is where I'm going to, kind of tell you guys that anything could happen in this game. And what I believe is going to happen is this game is going to be back and forth, really close, and it's just because this is a rivalry at this point. Up until the day that Nick Saban leaves and Alabama either falls off or whatever could happen to change this, as long as these programs have the same identities as they do now, this is going to be the greatest rivalry in the Southeast. It's a greater rivalry than the Iron Bowl. I truly believe that. I think that Alabama keeps it close. I think Georgia's a better team, though. And here's the bottom line. This is what I'm looking at. Alabama has not been able to run the ball all that effectively outside of the quarterback run game. In traditional run plays, Alabama has struggled. That is weakness versus weakness. Georgia's rush defense has not been great this year. But Georgia is going to be able to run the ball on maybe overinflated front that Alabama has and overinflated specifically because people are overlooking the fact that they're a little bit banged up right now in the front. So this secondary has to hold it down. But do you have an answer for Brock Bowers over the middle and Oscar Delp in that tight end room? Because if you need to commit resources to stop Brock Bowers and that over the middle passing attack, then you're going to have guys like Ladd McConkey, Dominic Lovett, Rosemy Saint step up. Dylan Bell has played some really good ball, doing everything for this Georgia team. I think Georgia wins this game. I think both teams are going to be able to put up points because of the big play nature that Alabama has. I'm taking Alabama to cover. I'm taking Georgia to win 36-33. Close game. Georgia wins in kind of dramatic fashion. That's where I think we're heading in this ball game. So give me the Bulldogs to win and knock Alabama out from the playoff. That is honestly what the committee is hoping for. We'll see if they get their way. Whoa. This is not New Mexico State. That's SMU. I don't know why I left it New Mexico State because I made the first slide and then I copied and pasted all the slides and I didn't change the text. But so because of that little gaffe, let's make this quick. SMU and Tulane. SMU missing Preston Stone is a big deal. Tulane's been playing really good defense. Their offense needs to look a lot better to pull away and win comfortably, but I think they pull away, win comfortably. In fact, I might add this to my walk that line. I didn't have it. Tulane minus 3.5, not enough. I got Tulane winning this ball game comfortably, 34-24. Appalachian State and Troy. There we go. We're back to normal here. This is going to be a fun game. Gunnar Watson has been a solid quarterback. This is a little bit of a revenge factor off of the last year's game where the Hail Mary ended up beating the Troy Trojans last year, one of their only 2 losses last season. They're another 2-loss team. John Summerall, no talks about him going anywhere right now. I have not seen anything at least. And yet, you got another 10-win season for the Troy Trojans. I think they are significantly better than App State. I think App State's lucky to be here. You would have James Madison in this conference championship instead of them. Even though they did beat James Madison still had a game on them. I think App State is playing better football late than they were early on, but I still think that their ceiling is very limited. I don't think they move the ball offensively that effective. I'm going with Troy to win this game 31-17. Iowa and Michigan. This is blowout city written all over it. Number 2, Michigan. Number 16, Iowa. I don't necessarily know if it's going to be a huge blowout. I think Michigan's offense will somewhat struggle to move the football, but I think they're going to be able to hit a couple of home runs in this game. And I think they're also going to be able to steadily move the ball. If they were able to do that at times against Ohio State, they're going to be able to do it against Iowa. So I'm going to take Michigan to win this game 34-3. I'm going to spot Iowa 3. I'm not going to call the shutout, and that barely notches the over of the over-under 35.5. But Michigan's a far better football team, and if something chaotic happens to where this is a close game in the fourth quarter, even though my team, Ohio State, just lost to Michigan last week, I'm still going to be laughing at them if this game's even close. And finally, Florida State and Louisville. You could argue this is maybe the most important game for the national perspective. And specifically, if we want the best playoff we could get, Florida State needs to lose this ball game. Because if I talk about playoff scenarios, and will be a good transition after I make this pick to playoff scenarios. If we talk about playoff scenarios here, Florida State is playing against the Louisville team that knocked themselves out of any long shot that they had at the playoff. Now, I don't even think they really had any because they lost to a 3-9 Pitt team by 17, by the way. But I think this Louisville defense is going to come in and play really good. And then Tate Rodemaker being questionable tomorrow is even more of a stress point for you because A.J. Duffy is not that guy. Brock Glenn, he's a freshman, but I don't even think he's going to become that guy. Just knowing what I know about these teams, Florida State has the playmaking ability on the outside. Florida State has the playmaking ability. I think that Florida State finds a way to win this game. I just have a feeling that in Charlotte, a gross game, a lot of people are thinking that affects Florida State a little bit more. I think it affects Louisville a little bit more. They need the big plays out of their offense. Their offense has not been great in these tough, gritty situations but their defense has been. So this is going to be low scoring. The under 47.5 is a play I don't have that you can maybe add, similar to the Tulane minus 3.5. I like the under, but I'm taking Florida State to win this ball game, and I'm going to take them to win it 17-13 in a little bit of a scrap out in Charlotte. So what we're going to do now is we are going to talk about these playoff scenarios that could be a factor on after Saturday. So here's what here's what needs to happen for each team. We're going to start with Georgia. Winning in the way that Georgia falls out, they need the right things to happen. It's going to be very hard to keep Georgia out of this year's playoff. I think that if they do lose, they will get priority over most of the one-loss teams. The one-loss teams they will not get priority over is probably Oregon, a one-loss Oregon. They would not get priority over one-loss Alabama because they lose to them. And because Alabama lost to Texas, they wouldn't get priority over Texas. So I think the floor for Georgia is probably 6th. I think that they could drop the 6. Now, you could see a world where Georgia loses and Alabama wins and the SEC misses out. All that needs to happen for that is Alabama wins, Michigan, Florida State, Washington all win. Or even if Oregon wins. Or even if Florida State loses, you could get Michigan, Oregon, and then Texas. I guess that wouldn't work out. So, you could easily see it being Michigan, Florida State, Oregon, and then Texas. Those are the 4 teams if all of those teams, all 4 teams win. Or if Washington wins, it'll be Michigan, Washington, Florida State, and Texas. Texas will get priority over both SEC schools. The SEC will miss out on the playoff. With Michigan, I think they're the only team that's locked no matter what happens against Iowa. Even if they lose against Iowa, I think that they will be the top-ranked one-loss school at the end of the day. And if they're the top-ranked one-loss school, I think that they're going to end up being in because, of course, they were an undefeated that fell, so there would only be at most 3 undefeateds. I think they're top-ranked because they beat Ohio State, and they have the best win out of any of those undefeateds out there. You could, I guess, Washington beat Oregon, but we'll see what happens. They got to play Oregon again. I think that Michigan is a lock no matter what happens, but let's just be real. They're not losing to Iowa. Number 3, Florida State is winning, get in, lose, and you're out. If you lose Florida State, you have not gotten the respect as they're the number 4 team, but I want to talk about them before I talk about what could happen in the Pac-12 championship, because that goes hand to hand with Ohio State as well. If Florida State loses, they're out no matter what. I don't see a path back in for Florida State because I think that they fall below Ohio State, and Ohio State is a security blanket. And at the end of the day, you have that security blanket of Ohio State covering over Florida State, and they're going to be hidden out of the playoff. But if they win, you're not keeping them out. So it's pretty black and white for Florida State. If they win, they're in. If they lose, they're out. Now we're going to talk about Washington and Oregon and the possible results that come here. If Washington loses close, there's going to be an argument for them to be in the playoff. There's going to be an argument stating, well, they had to beat the same team twice. They already beat Oregon earlier in the year. They've beaten everybody on their schedule. That's something that Texas, Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia cannot say if Georgia were to lose, obviously. Now, if you're a Washington fan and you lose tonight, what do you need to root for tomorrow for you to stay in that playoff? Well, the first thing you got to root for, Georgia to win and knock out Alabama, Michigan to win, doesn't matter really what they do. Florida State, you want them to lose. You want Florida State to lose because Oregon's going to get priority over you. For safekeeping, because I do think that Texas would jump Washington in the case that Washington loses and Texas wins, You want the long shot of Oklahoma State winning to happen. So you're rooting for Oklahoma State. You're rooting for Louisville. And if those couple of teams win, I think Washington's in over Ohio State. For all of you Ohio State fans that are complaining that Oregon's above Ohio State because you have the better resume, put your money where your mouth is and don't have a problem if Washington, who would have beat a playoff team in Oregon, who would have beaten a top 15, top 20-ish Arizona team and a top 20 Oregon State team. They have good wins. They also beat a Utah team that is probably a top 30 football team. I think Washington shouldn't be punished for getting to the conference championship. And for all of you guys saying, well, if the Big Ten would have changed the rules, guess what putting Ohio State in with Michigan does to the Big Ten? It benefits them. So if the Big Ten would have done that, they would have been the beneficiary of two teams in the playoff. Because I bet you if Ohio State and Michigan are playing this weekend and Ohio State beats Michigan this weekend in Indianapolis, I think both teams would get in. I think both Ohio State, now it is a crowded field, so you never know, but I think that would be the best shot for Ohio State and Michigan to be in the playoff for a second consecutive year and benefit the Big Ten. So for you Ohio State fans who are out there talking about, well, the Big Ten didn't give them the opportunity. Yes, but you realize that that doesn't only punish Ohio State. The Big Ten punishes themselves financially by doing that because the Big Ten gets a cut of money every time they have a team make the college football playoff. It's pretty simple. It's pretty black and white. They still have the divisions format, which I'm a fan of. I'm just not a fan of the unequal divisions that the Big Ten has. But I think divisions are important, and we're seeing why in a conference like the Mountain West, or we were seeing why last year in the Pac-12. And if you got, I don't want to take the time to make that argument right now. We have all post-conference championship time and post-championship time. We got all offseason to talk about that. Bottom line is this. If we go back to the conversation we were having, I think Washington with a loss, especially if it's close. Now, if they get blown out, that's a different discussion. But if it's a close loss against Oregon, they should be ranked above my Ohio State Buckeyes. As you can see, I have Ohio right here. All right. So that's what Washington needs. And we're going to try to speed this up so we can go to walk that line. Oregon, it's pretty simple, winning in, losing out. I don't think that if Oregon wins, they're going to find their way out of the playoff in any sort of fashion, especially if Oregon wins and Bo Nix, the Heisman Trophy winner with a 12-1 record, is sitting there. If he goes and wins the Heisman, they're going to want him in the playoff. So now we move to number 6, Ohio State. There is basically one scenario where Ohio State gets in. Georgia beats Alabama, knocks them out. I'm going from most complicated to least complicated. Louisville, a short underdog against Florida State, knocks out Florida State. So that's 2 steps that you need. Either you are rooting for Oregon to absolutely, I'm talking like 45-10, demolish Washington, or Washington just beats Oregon and knocks them out. And then the most far-fetched part about this is Oklahoma State beats Texas as a 15.5-point dog. Mike Gundy's done it before, or rather he's been, a menace before, and he's been able to be in these situations. But I just don't see how that happens. But that's what you're rooting for if you're Ohio State. Because in that scenario, you have Georgia 1, Michigan 2, Washington more than likely, because like I said, you probably need Washington to win, Oregon maybe to blow them out in an embarrassing way where Washington looks terrible, but probably Washington 3 and Ohio State 4. And you get Michigan, Washington in one semifinal, Ohio State and Georgia rematch in the other. That's how you get it. There's no way around it. And by the way, if all that stuff does happen, there is no other answer but Ohio State should be in. If Georgia beats Bama, if Washington beats Oregon, if Oklahoma State beats Texas, There's no other answer but Ohio State should be in. And Florida State loses Louisville, obviously. If you want to try to say, oh, we shouldn't punish Florida State for playing that 13th game, the difference between Washington and Florida State to me is we have not seen a huge sample size of Florida State without their quarterback. The one time we did, they didn't look impressive. If they lose in a very uninspiring, unimpressive way, yeah, you put Ohio State in. Now we're moving to Texas, and their path is a lot more clearer than Ohio State's. This is going to sound hard for a lot of you guys to wrap your head around, but I think if you're a Texas fan, you're rooting for Alabama to win. Now, maybe you might be a little bit worried that the committee makes the bad decision of putting Alabama in over you. I hear you on that. I think that the committee, if they were to do that, that would be absolutely ridiculous. But all of a sudden, if you beat Oklahoma State and take care of business, no matter what the score is, and Alabama later in the day beats Georgia, that vaults you up to from number 7 to probably number 4, because you have the loser of the Pac-12 championship falling below Texas, and then you have Georgia falling below Texas in that situation. So I think all that Texas really needs is to take care of business, and then Alabama beats Georgia, and I think they're in. Now, if Georgia beats Alabama, what does Texas need? Because that would leave them at 5th. They wouldn't be ahead of Georgia. I think it's pretty simple. Florida State loses, Texas is in, and I think that's where you get the best possible scenario for the college football playoff as far as the matchups go. Georgia versus Texas, Michigan versus Oregon. That is my dream playoff 4. That is the playoff 4 I want to see the most. 4 different conferences, 4 teams that have been great all year going at each other for a national championship. Those matchups are going to be incredible. The Sugar Bowl, Georgia versus Texas. The Rose Bowl, Michigan versus Oregon. That's my favorite one. But even if Washington beats Oregon, all Texas needs is for Florida State to lose in that situation. But I think if Georgia beats Alabama, you are basically all chips are in on that one game. Because if Florida State does win, where else are you going to be able to sneak in? The winner of the Pac-12's in, Michigan's in, Georgia's in because they won, and then Florida State's in because they won. So all of the chips are in one basket if you are Texas. If you go into the night game slate and Georgia wins after you win, you go to the night game slate, you need Florida State to lose to get in. Florida State wins, they're in, you're out. That's how it goes. So you have one of two things that need to happen. Either Georgia loses to Alabama, and then Texas, I think, would be in boxing out the SEC, or you have Florida State lose. Those are the 2 scenarios I think that would get Texas in. Finally, Alabama. How would Alabama get in? Because there's a lot of talk about Texas boxing them out. Well, the best thing for Alabama would, first and foremost, for them, of course, to win, but would be for Texas to lose to Oklahoma State. Because I think if those 2 things happen, they beat Georgia, they vault themselves above Ohio State. If Texas loses, they would be above, of course, Texas, who's at 7, Ohio State at 6, and the Pac-12 loser, hypothetically, if it were to be Oregon or Washington, would fall below them. And boom, Alabama's there at 4 because they would also have the head-to-head over Georgia. Heck, they might be number 3, jump from 8 to 3 at that point, especially if Florida State loses. So I think you're looking at just 2 results, really 1 result, and that's Texas losing to Oklahoma State. Because if Oklahoma State beats Texas, Alabama's no longer boxed out. But, I mean, we've talked about these different scenarios. Alabama beats Georgia here. Texas boxes them out as far as you could take them. And now you're rooting at the night game slate. If Texas wins and you beat Georgia, you're rooting for Florida State to lose. Because you're going to have Michigan, you're going to have the Pac-12 champion, and you're going to have Texas. So that 4th team is either you or Florida State. Florida State at 3 or you at 4. That's the bottom line. So that's the 8 teams and their scenarios to be able to get in. Let's just wrap this up with Walk That Line. New Mexico State plus 11 tonight. Love it. Love the cover. I like the cover of Washington. Don't like it as much now as the Tulane one. So now that I left Tulane off of here, I'm not adding it to the official record, but I'm telling you guys, Tulane minus 3.5. UNLV plus 2.5. I think they win the game outright tomorrow against Boise State. I think Alabama keeps it close against Georgia, and I think both teams score in the Alabama-Georgia game. And then Troy, I have minus 5.5. I think they win by 2 scores against an underwhelming Appalachian State team. And again, I had talked about Tulane minus 3.5. I like that one. And then the under in Louisville and Florida State, I also like that with the weather changes that we have seen. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoy this conference championship weekend. I'm going to have a reaction video on Saturday night because I'm not going to be around for Sunday. So I'll have a reaction on Sunday night or Monday morning for you guys. But thank you guys for tuning in. Really enjoy your weekend of football.